The man at Quade Orellan's feet coughed blood into the snow and stopped breathing before the sun cleared the ridge. Quade stood over the corpse with his hands still raised, breath misting in the pre-dawn cold, and watched 3 orc warriors emerge from the pines. They moved with the economy of trained fighters, weapons already drawn, and he knew with absolute certainty that explanations would not save him. The dead man wore orc leathers. Quade wore human homespun and had a skinning knife on his belt. The mathematics were simple and lethal. "I found him like this," Quade said in the human tongue, knowing they would not understand but needing to say something, anything, before they cut him down. The tallest warrior barked something harsh and guttural. The other 2 fanned out to flank him. Quade's knife stayed sheathed. He was a trapper, not a fool. 3 against 1, and they had reach and training and the moral certainty that he was a trespasser who had killed one of their own. He was already dying, Quade tried again, slower, as if that would somehow bridge the language gap. "I was checking my line and I heard a 4th figure appeared between the trees, smaller than the warriors but moving with the same predatory grace. Female," Quade registered, though the heavy furs and leather made it hard to tell at first. She had her hood up against the cold, but when she stepped into the clearing and saw the body, she shoved it back. Green skin, small tusks just visible past her lips, dark hair braided tight against her skull. Her eyes were the color of pine needles and they went very wide when she saw the dead man. She dropped to her knees beside the corpse, pressed her fingers to his throat, then his wrist. When she looked up at Quade, there was no grief in her expression, only calculation. She spoke rapidly to the 3 warriors. The tall one responded with what sounded like a question. She answered without looking away from Quade, and the quality of the silence that followed made the hair on his neck stand up. "You are on clan land," she said in accented but clear human speech. "The penalty is death." "I know," Quade said. "I crossed the boundary by accident. I was tracking a fox and I did not notice the markers until I was already over. Then I heard him calling for help." "Renick does not call for help." She studied Quade's face. "He kills trespassers." Then maybe he decided to make an exception before he died of whatever put that hole in his side. Quade kept his voice level. "I did not do that. That is hours old. I found him here bleeding out and I was trying to see if I could stop it when he died." The orc woman stood. She was perhaps 5.5 feet tall, built lean and athletic under the furs, and she moved like water over stone. "Renick was scouting the lower pass. He was to report back yesterday." She looked at the body again, then at the surrounding snow. "You are a trapper. Same eyes." She walked a slow circle around the clearing, reading something in the disturbed snow that Quade could not parse. When she completed the circuit, she stood very still for a long moment. Then she turned to the 3 warriors and spoke in her own language. The tall one objected immediately, his voice rising. She cut him off with 2 sharp words and he fell silent, though his hand stayed on his weapon. She walked back to Quade. Up close, she smelled like wood smoke and pine resin and something else, something green and wild he could not name. "Renick was killed by a mountain cat," she said. 2 hours before dawn, maybe 3. The cat ate his liver and left when it heard you coming." "Then I did not kill him." "No," she paused. "But you are still a trespasser on clan land during the blood season. The law is clear. You die before the sun clears the trees." Quade looked at the sky. The ridge was already orange with approaching dawn. "That gives me about 3 minutes." "Yes." "Is there an appeal process?" "No." "Fantastic." Quade took a breath, let it out slow. He had survived a bad winter, a worse spring, and a summer that had nearly broken him. Dying in the snow because he chased a fox over an invisible line seemed like a stupid way to end it, but he supposed men had died for less. "Can I ask a favor?" The orc woman tilted her head. You can ask. My traps are set on a 2-day line. If nobody checks them, whatever I catch will suffer. There is a cabin 3 miles southeast of here, just past the big oak with the lightning scar. Inside there is a map showing where each trap is placed. Would you send someone to clear the line? She blinked. Whatever she had expected him to say, it was not that. You want me to save the animals you tried to kill. I want them to die fast if they die at all, not slow, waiting for me. The tall warrior said something impatient. The sun was a hair closer to the ridge. The orc woman looked at Quade for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then she did something he did not expect. She grabbed his wrist. Her grip was iron strong, her skin rough with calluses. She yanked his arm up so the others could see, holding it high like a prize, and spoke in a voice that carried across the clearing. The words were formal, rhythmic, clearly some kind of ritual formula. The 3 warriors reacted immediately. The tall one started shouting. One of the others actually took a step back as if she had struck him. She kept talking, her hand locked around Quade's wrist, her eyes on the warriors. When she finished, the silence that fell was absolute. "What did you just do?" Quade asked. "Invoked clan law." She released his wrist. Specifically, the law of claiming. A warrior who saves a life may claim that person as bound kin. You pulled Renick from a cat fight. You tried to save him. Under the law, his life debt passes to his clan, and I am claiming it. I did not pull him from anything. He was already dead when I got here. The cat was eating him. You drove it off. That counts. She met his eyes. I am Ezora Drashin, scout of the Highland clan. I am invoking my right to claim you as bound kin under the old law. As of this moment, you are mine. That means you cannot be executed for trespass. It also means if anyone wants you dead, they have to go through me first. The tall warrior spat something that sounded like a curse. Ezora answered without looking at him, her tone flat and final. He took a step toward her and she turned fast, her hand dropping to the hatchet at her belt. He stopped. Whatever he saw in her face made him reconsider. He said something else, quieter, almost pleading. She shook her head once. He looked at Quade with open hatred, then turned and stalked back into the trees. The other 2 warriors followed, though one of them glanced back with an expression Quade could not read. When they were gone, Ezora let out a long breath. "You just made enemies," Quade said. "Yes, because of me. Because of the law." She looked at the dead man in the snow. Renick was unbonded. A scout who dies in service, his deeds pass to whoever claims them first. There are 3 warriors who wanted that claim. They wanted his name added to their lineage, his kill count added to their standing. I just took it out from under them. Why? Because you were going to die for checking your trap line, and I am tired of pointless killing. She crouched beside the body, closed its eyes with surprising gentleness. And because when you thought you had 3 minutes to live, you asked me to check your traps so the animals would not suffer. That is not something a bad man does. That is not a reason to start a blood feud. I did not start anything. The law is the law. They can be angry, but they cannot challenge it. She stood, brushed snow from her knees. We need to move. The War Council meets at sunrise to decide what to do with you. If we are late, they will assume I killed you myself, and that will cause a different set of problems. War Council, Quade repeated. That sounds ominous. It is a council. During war season, the name is accurate. She started walking north toward the high ground. Come on, and do not touch any of the boundary stones on the way up. If you break taboo, the claiming will not protect you. Quade followed because the alternative was freezing to death alone in the snow. They walked in silence for the better part of an hour, climbing steadily into the highlands. The trees thinned as they gained elevation, replaced by rocky outcroppings and windswept scrub. The sun cleared the ridge properly and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. War season, Quade asked eventually, because he could not help himself. The 4 months when the clans settle old debts. Ezora did not slow her pace. It is traditional, keeps everyone sharp. You have a season for warfare. You have a season for planting. That is not the same thing. It is efficient. She glanced back at him. Are you always this argumentative? Only when someone claims me as property and drags me to a war council. Bound kin is not property, it is family. She paused. Distant family, the kind you see at gatherings and try to avoid. That does not sound better. It is better than dead. Quade could not argue with that. They kept climbing. The path grew steeper and the wind picked up, howling down from the peaks with enough force to make Quade stagger. Ezora moved through it like it was nothing, her braids barely stirring. He was breathing hard by the time they crested the final rise and the camp came into view. It was bigger than he expected. Easily 200 people, maybe more, spread across a natural plateau tucked against the mountainside. Hide tents in neat rows, fire pits sending smoke into the pale sky, racks of drying meat and fish, corrals for horses and goats. It looked organized, prosperous, permanent in the way only temporary things can be. People moved between the tents with purpose, carrying water, tending fires, sharpening weapons. A few looked up as Ezora approached. None of them looked friendly. Stay close, Ezora said quietly. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact with anyone wearing red, and if someone challenges you directly, do not respond. Let me handle it. What if they do not challenge me directly? Then you are probably fine. Probably, she did not answer. They entered the camp and the reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped. People stared. A child pointed and his mother pulled him behind her, her hand going to the knife at her belt. An old woman spat on the ground as they passed. Ezora ignored all of it, walking with her head high and her shoulders back, and Quade did his best to match her composure. They were halfway across the camp when the tall warrior from the clearing stepped out of a tent directly into their path. He had changed into ceremonial leathers, all dark reds and blacks, and he was not alone. 2 more warriors flanked him, both nearly as tall, both armed. Ezora, the tall one said in human speech, his accent thick but understandable. You bring the trespasser to council. I bring my claimed kin to council, Vorik, Ezora replied in the same language. As is my right. You're right, Vorik smiled, showing a lot of tusk. You invoke old law to claim a human, a trespasser, a man who killed Rennick. Rennick was killed by a cat. The human found the body. So you say. So the tracks say. Ezora took a step forward. She was half a foot shorter than Vorik and probably 60 pounds lighter, but she moved like she was the bigger threat. Do you call me a liar, Vorik? Vorik's smile faded. I call you reckless. I call you selfish. You take Rennick's death claim for yourself and give it to a human rather than let it go to a warrior who earned it. The law does not care what you think was earned. The law is old. The law is from a time when we had enough warriors to waste them on sentiment. Vorik looked at Quade, and there was nothing but cold calculation in his eyes. Tell me, human, what will you do with Rennick's deeds? Will you add them to your standing in your human village? Will you boast to your human friends that you are orc kin now? Quade kept his mouth shut. Ezora had been clear. Do not respond. He does not even speak, one of the flanking warriors said with disgust. He is a coward. He is smart, Ezora said. Smarter than you, Kelris, which is not a high standard but still worth noting. Kelris bristled. Vorik put a hand on his shoulder, stopping him from doing something stupid. The council will decide, Vorik said. And when they do, I think you will find that old laws do not protect you from bad decisions. I will take my chances. Vorik held her gaze for a long moment, then stepped aside. Ezora walked past him without a backward glance, and Quade followed. He could feel Vorik's eyes on his back all the way across the camp. The council met in a tent twice the size of any other, its walls reinforced with wooden poles and its roof peaked high enough to let the smoke from the central fire escape through a hole at the top. Ezora pushed through the entrance flap, and Quade ducked in after her. Inside, the air was warm and thick with the smell of burning pine. A dozen orcs sat in a loose circle around the fire, all of them older, all of them wearing variations of the same ceremonial leathers Vorik had changed into. At the far end of the circle, an ancient orc with gray-streaked hair and a scar that ran from her left eye to her jaw watched them enter with an expression of profound weariness. "Ezora Drashin," the scarred woman said. Her voice was rough like wind over gravel. "You invoke the claiming law." "Yes, Chieftain Varga, for a human." "Yes," Varga sighed. She looked at Quade, then at Ezora, then at the fire. "Explain." Ezora did. She kept it short, factual, clinical. Renick's death, the cat tracks, Quade's presence, the trespass law, the claiming. When she finished, the council sat in silence. One of the elders, a man with white braids and a crooked nose, leaned forward. "You claim he saved Renick's life," the man said. "He drove off the cat. That counts under the law. The law requires intent." Did he drive off the cat to save Renick, or did he simply arrive and the cat left? Ezora hesitated. "The law does not specify intent. It specifies action, convenient interpretation, accurate interpretation." Another elder, this one a woman with a burned scar across her throat, spoke up. "Even if we accept the claim, what do you intend to do with him? He is human. He cannot join the war band, he cannot hunt clan grounds, he cannot marry into the bloodline. What purpose does he serve?" "He is a trapper," Ezora said. "He knows the lowlands. He can teach our scouts how to move through human territory without being seen. That is useful. Or he can teach humans how to move through our territory," the white-braided man countered. "He is a risk. Everything is a risk." Ezora's voice was steady, but Quade could hear the tension underneath. "The law says I can claim him. I have claimed him. Unless you want to overturn law that has stood for 6 generations, the matter is settled." Varga raised a hand and the room fell silent. She looked at Quade for a long time, her single good eye sharp and assessing. "Human," she said. "Do you accept this claim?" Quade glanced at Ezora. She gave him the smallest nod. "I do," Quade said. "You understand what it means?" "Not really," Quade admitted. "But I understand that without it I am dead. So yes, I accept." Varga almost smiled. "Honesty. That is rare." She looked around the circle. "Does anyone challenge Ezora's right to claim under the old law?" Silence. Then Vorik pushed through the tent flap and strode to the center of the circle. He did not sit. He stood with his arms crossed, staring at Ezora. "I challenge." The council stirred. Varga's expression did not change. "On what grounds?" "The claiming is selfish. Ezora invokes the law not to honor Renick's deeds but to deny them to warriors who would have used them properly. She gives clan standing to a human who will never serve the clan. That is not what the law was written for." "The law does not care why it is invoked," Ezora said, "only that it is invoked correctly." "Then I invoke a different law." Vorik turned to face the council. "I challenge the legitimacy of the claim. I say the human did not save Renick. I say he killed Renick and Ezora is either deceived or complicit. I demand trial." The council erupted. 3 elders started shouting at once, 2 in favor of the challenge, 1 against. Varga let it go for a few seconds, then brought her fist down on the ground hard enough to make the fire jump. The noise stopped. "Explain your evidence," Varga said. "The human was found alone with Renick's body. No one saw the cat. No one saw the human arrive. We have only his word and Ezora's interpretation of the tracks. That is not enough to overturn a death sentence for trespass. The tracks are clear, Ezora said. I read them myself. Cat claws, cat teeth, cat prints in the snow. Rennick's wounds match a cat attack. Or they match what a human would do to make it look like a cat attack. Vorik's voice was calm, reasonable, and absolutely certain. A trapper would know how to fake tracks. A trapper would know how to make a kill look like an animal attack. I say he murdered Rennick and Ezora was fooled. Ezora opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at Quade, and for the first time since he met her, she looked uncertain. You are accusing me of incompetence. I am accusing the human of murder and you of being human soft. Vorik met her eyes. Prove me wrong. Varga stood. The tent fell silent again. Vorik invokes his right to challenge the claim's legitimacy. Under law, that requires a trial of proof. Ezora, you may choose the terms. Ezora's jaw tightened. When? By tradition, 3 days from now, that gives you time to prepare. And if I refuse the trial, then the claim is void and the human dies for trespass. Varga's expression was not unkind, but it was immovable. Those are the options, Ezora. Choose. Ezora looked at Quade again. He tried to give her an out, tried to signal that she did not have to do this, that he was not worth starting a war over. She ignored him. I accept the trial, she said. 3 days from now, I will prove the human is innocent and the claim is lawful. So witnessed, Varga said. Council is dismissed. The elders filed out in silence. Vorik lingered just long enough to give Ezora a long, measuring look, then followed the others. When the tent was empty except for Ezora, Quade, and Varga, the chieftain let out a long breath. You are making my life very difficult, Varga said. I am sorry, chieftain. No, you are not. You are stubborn and righteous, and you have been looking for a fight ever since your brother died. Varga's voice was tired. This is not the fight, Ezora. This is a human who got lost and a law you are using as a weapon. Let it go. I cannot. You can. You choose not to. Varga looked at Quade. Do you know what a trial of proof is, human? No. It is an endurance trial. You and Ezora will be sent into the deep snow with minimal supplies. You will have to survive together for 2 days and return with proof that you cooperated as bound kin should. If you succeed, the claim stands. If you fail, you both die. She let that sink in. The temperature in the deep snow is cold enough to kill an unprepared orc in 6 hours. A human will last maybe 3. Vorik knows this. He is betting you will die and Ezora will fail to bring you back. That will prove the claim was false and he will get Rennick's deeds by default. That seems like a rigged game, Quade said. It is. But it is the game Ezora chose to play. Varga turned to Ezora. You have 3 days to teach him how to survive in conditions that will kill him. I suggest you start now. They left the tent together and walked to the far edge of the camp, where the tents gave way to open ground and the wind cut like a blade. Ezora found a flat rock and sat down heavily, her shoulders slumped. Quade sat beside her. You did not have to do that, he said. Yes, I did. I am a stranger. You do not owe me anything. I owe the law. She looked at him and her eyes were tired. The law is the only thing that keeps us from tearing each other apart every winter. If I let Vorik bend it because it is inconvenient, what is the point of having it at all? So this is about principle. This is about survival. Mine, yours, the clan's, all of it. She leaned back against the rock. Vorik wants power. He thinks if he adds Rennick's deeds to his own, he will have enough standing to challenge for war leader next season. He is probably right, and if he becomes war leader, he will push for expansion into the lowlands. That means war with your people. That means a lot of dead orcs and a lot of dead humans and nothing gained except blood and grief. So you claimed me to stop a war. I claimed you because it was the right thing to do and it happened to also stop a war. Two birds, one rock. She rubbed her face. Now I just have to keep you alive long enough to prove it. How cold does it get in the deep snow? Cold enough that you will lose fingers if you are not careful. Cold enough that if you fall asleep, you will not wake up. She looked at him. Have you ever been in real cold? The kind that makes your teeth ache and your lungs burn. I trapped through last winter. In the lowlands. This is different. This is mountain cold. This is the kind of cold that does not care how tough you think you are. She stood, offered him a hand. Come on. We have 3 days to turn you into something that might survive too. We are wasting time. The next 3 days were the hardest of Quade's life. Ezora started with the basics. How to wrap his extremities so the cold could not get in. How to layer furs so he could shed or add as his body temperature changed. How to recognize the early signs of frostbite and how to treat it before it became permanent. She showed him how to build a shelter in the snow, how to insulate it with pine boughs, how to create a small fire that would not suffocate them with smoke. She taught him to snowshoe, which was harder than it looked. She taught him to read the weather by the color of the sky and the way the wind smelled. She taught him how to find water under the ice and how to purify it without wasting fuel. She taught him the orc words for danger, cold, fire, shelter, help. She made him repeat them until he could say them in his sleep. At night, she drilled him on what would happen during the trial. They would be given 1 pack with basic supplies. Flint, a single knife, a length of rope, 2 water skins, and enough dried meat to last 1 day if they were careful. Everything else they would have to make or find. The trial ground was a valley 10 miles north of camp, surrounded by peaks high enough that the snow never melted. They would have to enter at dawn, survive 2 full days, and return by the morning of the 3rd with proof that they worked together. What counts as proof? Quade asked on the 2nd night. They were sitting by a small fire outside Ezora's tent, close enough to the main camp to be seen but far enough to have privacy. Ezora was sharpening her knife, the rhythmic scrape of stone on steel oddly soothing. Witnesses will follow us at a distance, she said. They will not interfere, but they will watch. We have to show cooperation. Shared labor, shared resources, shared survival. If one of us does all the work and the other just exists, that is not bound kin. That is a burden. So I have to pull my weight. You have to pull more than your weight. You are human. They expect you to fail. If you want to prove them wrong, you have to be visibly useful. She tested the knife's edge against her thumb, nodded in satisfaction. Can you hunt? I can trap. Not the same. Close enough. She looked at him. Show me. Quade spent the next hour explaining the mechanics of trap lines, how to read animal sign, how to place a snare so it looked natural. Ezora listened with the focus of someone who made her living by knowing things, asking questions that showed she understood the principles even if the application was new. By the end, she was nodding. That could work, she said. If we can catch something in the trial ground, that is proof of cooperation. You set the trap, I track the game, we both benefit. What if there is no game? Then we get creative. She set the knife aside. You are good at that, I think. At what? Getting creative. Staying alive when you should not. She smiled, just a little. You have that look, like you have been underestimated before and learned to use it. Quade thought about the winter that had nearly killed him, the spring that had been worse, the summer spent rebuilding a trapline from nothing. I have had practice. Good, you will need it. She stood, stretched. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we do a practice run, full gear, half rations, 6 hours in the snow. If you can handle that, you might survive the real thing. The practice run nearly killed him. Ezora took him up into the foothills just after dawn, both of them loaded with packs and dressed in full cold weather gear. The temperature was brutal, the wind worse. Quade's lungs burned with every breath, and his fingers went numb even through the layers of fur and leather. Ezora moved like she was taking a casual stroll, her breath barely visible, her pace relentless. They hiked for 2 hours before she called a halt. By then, Quade's legs were shaking and his vision had started to narrow at the edges. Ezora took one look at him and handed him a water skin. "Drink." Small sips, he drank. The water was so cold it hurt his teeth. "How are you not dying? I grew up here. My body knows how to regulate." She pulled a strip of dried meat from her pack, tore it in half, gave him the larger piece. "Eat. You are burning energy faster than you think." They ate in silence. The wind howled around them, driving snow into every gap and crevice. Quade's hands shook as he chewed. Ezora watched him with an expression he could not read. "You are scared," she said. "Yes." "Good. Fear keeps you careful. It is overconfidence that kills." She finished her meat, tucked the skin away. "But you are still here. You have not asked to turn back. That means you have spine. I can work with that. What happens if I do not make it? You die. I probably die trying to save you. Vorik gets what he wants and the clan goes to war." She said it like she was describing the weather. "So do not fail." They spent the rest of the practice run building a snow shelter and starting a fire with damp wood. Quade's fingers were too cold to hold the flint steady, so Ezora showed him how to brace it against his knee and strike at an angle. It took 20 tries before he got a spark to catch. By the time they had a real fire going, the sun was past its peak, and the temperature had dropped another 10 degrees. "We should head back," Ezora said. "If we stay much longer, you will not make it down." They hiked back in silence. Quade's legs felt like they were made of wet rope, and his chest ached from the cold, but he kept pace. When they finally reached the camp, he collapsed outside Ezora's tent and did not move for a solid 5 minutes. Ezora crouched beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "You did well," she said quietly. "I nearly died." "But you did not. That is the important part." She helped him sit up. "One more day to rest, then the real trial. Think you can do it?" Quade looked at her. Her face was calm, her eyes steady, and he realized with a jolt that she actually believed he could survive this. That she had staked her life and her standing on the assumption that he was strong enough to make it through 2 days in the deep snow. It was the kind of faith he had not earned and did not deserve, but it was there, solid and unshakable. "I can do it," he said. She smiled. "Good, because I am getting attached to you and I would hate to watch you freeze." The night before the trial, Vorik came to their fire. He arrived alone, which was somehow worse than if he had brought his warriors. Ezora saw him coming and stood, her hand dropping to her knife. Quade stayed seated, too tired to stand but ready to move if things went bad. "Ezora," Vorik said, "I came to offer terms." "I am not interested in your terms. You should be. They are generous." He glanced at Quade, then back to Ezora. "Withdraw the claim. Admit you were mistaken. I will speak to the council on your behalf and they will overlook your error. You keep your standing, I get Renik's deeds, the human goes home. Everyone wins. Except the human dies for trespass. He was always going to die. You just delayed it." Vorik's voice was patient, almost kind. "You are a good scout, Ezora. You have a future in this clan. Do not throw it away for a stranger. The law says he is not a stranger. The law says he is mine. The law is not your friend here. You know what the trial ground will do to him. You know he will not survive." Vorik took a step closer. "I do not want to watch you die trying to save a human who is already dead. Withdraw the claim, walk away, let this go." Ezora met his eyes. "No," Vorik sighed. "Then you are a fool." He turned to leave, paused, looked back. "For what it is worth, I hope you prove me wrong." He walked away into the dark. Ezora watched him go, her jaw tight. Quade stood, moved to stand beside her. He sounded almost sincere at the end. He was. Vorik is not cruel, he just wants power and he is willing to let people die to get it. She looked at Quade. Are you ready? No. Good answer. She handed him a bundle of furs. Sleep in these tonight. Your body needs to get used to the weight, and drink as much water as you can before dawn. Dehydration kills faster than cold. Quade did as he was told. He slept poorly, waking every hour to the sound of wind and the knowledge that by this time tomorrow he would either be fighting for his life or already dead. When dawn finally came, it was almost a relief. The trial ground was exactly as bleak as he had imagined. They hiked north through the pre-dawn dark, flanked by a silent escort of warriors who would serve as witnesses. The path climbed steadily into the high peaks, the air growing thinner and colder with every mile. By the time the sun cleared the horizon, they were surrounded by snow and ice and nothing else. No trees, no shelter, no signs of life. Just white in every direction and a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Varga met them at the entrance to the valley. She handed Ezora the trial pack, checked its contents, nodded in satisfaction. The terms are clear. 2 days. Return by dawn on the 3rd with proof of cooperation. Witnesses will observe but not interfere. Do you accept? We accept, Ezora said. Varga looked at Quade. You understand what you have agreed to? Yes. Then good luck. She stepped aside. The trial begins now. They walked into the valley and the world became pain. The cold was immediate and absolute, sinking through every layer of fur and leather like it was nothing. The wind screamed down from the peaks, driving ice crystals into exposed skin hard enough to draw blood. Quade pulled his hood tighter and kept walking, following Ezora's lead. She moved with purpose, angling toward a rock outcropping on the valley's eastern edge. We build shelter first, she shouted over the wind. Everything else comes after. They reached the outcropping and Ezora started digging into the snowbank at its base. Quade joined her, using his hands and a flat piece of wood from the pack. The snow was hard-packed and heavy, resistant to every strike. His hands went numb almost immediately. Ezora worked without pause, her movements efficient and precise. After 30 minutes, they had carved out a shallow depression barely large enough for both of them to crouch inside. Good enough for now, Ezora said. We will expand it tonight. Right now we need water and fire. They gathered what little dry wood they could find, mostly scraps of wind-blasted brush and a few pieces of deadfall tucked under the outcropping. Ezora stacked it carefully while Quade chipped ice from a nearby drift and melted it over the tiny fire she coaxed to life. The process took over an hour. By the time they had filled both water skins, Quade could not feel his feet. Eat, Ezora said, handing him a strip of dried meat. Then we scout for game sign. They ate quickly, conserving their supplies. The meat was tough and salty and tasted like the best thing Quade had ever eaten. When they finished, Ezora stood and offered him a hand. He took it, let her pull him upright. His legs protested but held. They spent the afternoon searching the valley for any sign of life. Quade spotted tracks first, small and precise, leading toward a cluster of rocks on the valley's northern slope. Hare, he said. Ezora crouched, studied the tracks. Fresh, maybe 2 hours old. She looked at him. Can you catch it? If I can make a snare, yes. Make it. Quade worked fast, using the rope from the pack and a thin branch he stripped from their firewood supply. The snare was simple, a loop set at hair height along the most obvious path between the rocks and the scrub. He disguised it with snow and stepped back. Done. How long? Could be an hour, could be a day. Hares are unpredictable. We do not have a day. Ezora looked at the sky. The sun was already sinking toward the peaks. We check it at first light. If it is empty, we move to Plan 2. What is Plan 2? I have not thought of it yet. They made it back to the shelter just as the light started to fail. The temperature plummeted with the sun, dropping so fast Quade could feel it happening in real time. Ezora expanded the shelter while he kept the fire going, both of them working in near total darkness. By the time they finished, the shelter was just large enough for them to lie down side by side with the fire at their feet. We sleep in shifts, Ezora said. 2 hours on, 2 hours off. The fire cannot go out or we die. Quade took the first shift. He sat with his back against the snow wall, feeding twigs into the tiny fire and watching the entrance for signs of the witnesses. He did not see them, but he knew they were out there, watching, waiting to see if he would fail. The thought made him irrationally angry. He fed that anger into determination and kept the fire going. When Ezora woke to take her shift, she found him still awake, his eyes red-rimmed but alert. "You should have woken me sooner." "I was not tired. You are a terrible liar." She touched his shoulder. "Sleep, I will keep watch." Quade slept and dreamed of freezing. He woke to Ezora shaking him gently, her face close to his in the dim firelight. "Dawn is close. We need to check the snare." They crawled out of the shelter into a world of ice and wind. The temperature had somehow gotten worse overnight, cold enough that Quade's first breath made him cough. Ezora handed him a water skin and he drank, the liquid so cold it made his throat ache. They hiked to the snare in silence. Quade's heart sank when he saw it from a distance, the loop still intact, no sign of disturbance. Then Ezora grabbed his arm and pointed. There, half hidden behind a rock, a hair hung limp in the snare, frozen solid. "You did it," Ezora said, and there was genuine relief in her voice. They brought the hair back to the shelter and spent the next hour carefully thawing and preparing it. The meat was lean and tough, but there was enough for both of them to eat well. Ezora portioned it carefully, setting some aside for later. "This is proof," she said. "You set the snare, I tracked the sign, we both ate, the witnesses will have seen it. So we are done, we are halfway done. We still have to survive another day and make it back." She looked at him. "How are you holding up? I cannot feel my toes." "That is bad, let me see." Quade unlaced his boots and pulled off the layers of wrapping around his feet. 3 of his toes on his left foot were white and waxy. Ezora hissed through her teeth. "Frostbite. Early stage, but we need to treat it now." She pressed his feet against her stomach, under her furs, and the sudden warmth was almost painful. Quade tried to pull away, but she held him firm. "Stay still. Your body needs to rewarm them slowly or the damage gets worse." They sat like that for 20 minutes, Ezora holding his feet against her skin, Quade trying not to think about how intimate the gesture was. When the color finally started to return to his toes, she released him. "Better." "Yes, thank you. Do not thank me yet." "If they blister, we have a problem." She handed him clean wrappings. "Rewrap them, tighter this time, and tell me if they start to hurt worse." The second day was colder than the first. They rationed the remaining hair meat and meltwater, moving as little as possible to conserve energy. Ezora told him stories to pass the time, tales of her childhood in the clan. Her brother who had died in a raid 3 years ago, the reason she had become a scout instead of a warrior. Quade listened and told his own stories in return about the trap line, the winter that nearly broke him, the fox he had been tracking when this whole mess started. "You regret it?" Ezora asked as the sun began to set on the second day. Crossing the boundary, Quade thought about it. About the cold and the pain and the very real possibility that he would not survive to see another sunrise. About Ezora, who had staked her life on a stranger because it was the right thing to do. About the way she looked at him sometimes, like he was worth saving. No, he said. I do not regret it, she smiled. Good, because I do not regret claiming you. They survived the second night by sheer stubbornness. The fire guttered twice, and both times Ezora managed to coax it back to life with the last scraps of fuel. Quade's frostbitten toes blistered and swelled, but the pain was manageable. By the time dawn came, they were both exhausted, hungry, and half frozen, but they were alive. We have to move, Ezora said. If we are not back by sunrise, the trial fails. They packed what little they had and started the long hike back to camp. Quade's legs felt like they were made of stone and his lungs burned with every breath, but he kept moving. Ezora stayed close, her hand on his elbow when the path grew steep, her voice steady and calm. Almost there. Just a little farther. They crested the final rise just as the sun cleared the horizon. Varga stood at the valley entrance, flanked by the witnesses and half the camp. When she saw them, her expression shifted from worry to relief. You made it. We did, Ezora said. She swayed on her feet and Quade caught her, held her upright. She looked at him, surprised. I am fine. You are exhausted. Let me help. She did not argue. They walked into camp together, past the watching orcs, past Vorik and his warriors, past the elders who had doubted them. Varga met them at the council tent and gestured for them to sit. They collapsed onto the furs, too tired to stand. The witnesses report that you worked together throughout the trial, Varga said. They saw cooperation, shared labor, and mutual survival. The claim is legitimate. Vorik's challenge is dismissed. Vorik, standing at the back of the tent, said nothing. His expression was unreadable. After a long moment, he nodded once and left. Varga turned to Ezora. You have proven your point. The human is bound kin under the law, but that raises a new question. What do you intend to do with him now? Ezora looked at Quade. He looked back. Neither of them had an answer. The days after the trial passed in a strange, suspended quiet. Quade recovered slowly, his frostbitten toes healing into angry blisters that made walking painful. Ezora brought him food and checked his bandages and did not talk about what came next. The camp settled back into its routines. The war season ground on. Vorik avoided them both. It was 3 weeks before Quade felt strong enough to leave the camp. Ezora walked with him to the boundary, ostensibly to make sure he did not get lost, but really, he suspected, because she did not want to say goodbye. They stood at the line of stones that marked clan territory. The lowlands spread out below them, and neither of them moved. You could stay, Ezora said finally. I do not think the clan would like that. The clan does not get a vote. You are bound kin. That means you have a place here if you want it. Quade looked at her. She was staring out at the horizon, her jaw tight, her hands clenched at her sides. He realized with a jolt that she was nervous, that she actually cared whether he stayed or left. The knowledge settled in his chest like a warm coal. What would I do here? He asked gently. Teach the scouts. Help with the trap lines, learn the language properly. She glanced at him. Other things. Other things. Yes, he took a breath. Ezora, I need to say something. Do not. Her voice was sharp. Do not say something kind and final. Do not thank me and leave. I do not want that. I was going to say I want to stay. She blinked, turned to face him fully. You do, I do. But I cannot just disappear. I have traps set. I have a cabin. I have obligations. He hesitated. Give me 2 weeks. Let me clear the line, close up the cabin, make arrangements. Then I will come back if you still want me. Of course I still want you. She said it like it was obvious. I claimed you. That means you are mine. The law says I am yours, Quade said quietly. But what do you say? She looked at him for a long time. Then she stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath in the cold air. I say the law has nothing to do with it anymore, she said. I say I want you to stay because I like you. Because you are stubborn and kind and you make me laugh. Because when I thought you might die in the trial ground, I realized I did not want to live in a world where you were not in it." She paused. "Is that clear enough?" "Very clear." Quade's heart was pounding. "For the record, I feel the same way." "Good." She smiled, and it was the warmest thing he had seen in weeks. "Then go, clear your obligations, come back, I will be here." He left that afternoon and spent the next 2 weeks in a blur of activity. He cleared the trap line, sold what furs he had to a trader in the nearest human village, closed up the cabin, and packed what little he owned into 2 traveling bags. When he was done, he stood in the empty cabin and felt nothing but relief. This place had been survival, nothing more. The Highlands, Ezora, the clan that was something else. That was a future. He made it back to the boundary on the 14th day. Ezora was waiting for him, sitting on one of the boundary stones with her bow across her knees. When she saw him, she stood, and the smile that broke across her face was bright enough to rival the sun. "You came back," she said. "I said I would. People say a lot of things." She took his bags, slung them over her shoulder like they weighed nothing. "Come on. I set up a tent for you near mine. The elders want to meet with you tomorrow to discuss your role in the clan, but tonight you rest." They walked back to camp together, side by side, and this time when people stared, Quade did not look away. He met their eyes and nodded, and some of them nodded back. It was a start. The season turned toward spring, and Quade learned what it meant to be bound kin. He taught the scouts how to set snares and read animal sign. He learned the orc language in earnest, stumbling through vocabulary lessons with Ezora and a patient elder named Thessa, who thought his accent was hilarious. He helped with camp chores, hauling water and firewood and repairing tents. He learned to fight with an orc blade, badly at first, then with increasing competence under Ezora's relentless instruction. He also learned what it meant to be Ezora's. They did not talk about it at first. It was easier to let it unfold naturally, in the quiet spaces between days. A hand on his shoulder when she passed, her laughter at his terrible jokes, the way she always sat close enough that their knees touched when they shared a fire. The way he found himself looking for her in every crowd, the way his day felt incomplete if he did not see her. It was Ezora who finally said it out loud. They were sitting outside her tent one evening, watching the sun set over the peaks. The camp was quiet. Most of the clan gathered at the far end for a feast Quade had not felt ready to attend. Ezora had stayed behind with him, claiming she was not hungry, though he suspected it was more that she did not want him to be alone. "I have been thinking," she said. "That sounds dangerous." She elbowed him. "I have been thinking about what happens when the clan moves to the summer grounds." "I assume I move with you." "Yes. But in what capacity?" She looked at him. "Bound kin is a legal status. It means you are part of the clan, but it does not mean anything about us, about what we are to each other." Quade's mouth went dry. "What do you want us to be?" "I want you to be mine." "Not because the law says so, because you choose it." She took his hand, laced her fingers through his. "I want to wake up next to you. I want to fight beside you. I want to build something with you that is ours, not the clan's or the law's or anyone else's. I want you, Quade, if you will have me." Quade did not trust himself to speak. He pulled her close instead, wrapped his arms around her, and held on like she was the only solid thing in the world. She made a small sound, surprised, then melted into him. They stayed like that for a long time, the sun sinking below the peaks, the cold creeping in. When they finally pulled apart, Quade found his voice. "I will have you," he said, "for as long as you will let me." "Good." She kissed him, soft and careful, like she was afraid he might break. He kissed her back, less careful, and she laughed against his mouth. "Come inside." "It is too cold out here." They went inside. The spring thaw came early that year, melting the snow and turning the highlands green almost overnight. The clan prepared to descend to the summer grounds, packing tents and supplies and organizing the long caravan. Quade helped where he could, his place in the clan now secure enough that people stopped staring and started treating him like he belonged. Vorik approached him 2 days before the move. Quade was repairing a tent pole when the warrior appeared, standing just outside arm's reach, his expression carefully neutral. Quade set down his tools and stood. "Vorik, Quade Orellan." Vorik looked uncomfortable, which was so unlike him that Quade immediately went on guard. "I owe you an apology." "You do?" "Yes. I challenged your claim because I thought you were weak. I thought Ezora was a fool for protecting you. I was wrong." He paused. "You survived the trial ground. You learned our ways. You became part of this clan. That takes strength. I did not see it before." "I see it now." Quade did not know what to say. "Thank you. I still think Ezora is stubborn and reckless." Vorik almost smiled. "But she was right about you. You are worth protecting." "I appreciate that." Vorik nodded once, then turned and walked away. Ezora, who had been watching from a distance, came over and stood beside Quade. That looked civil. It was bizarre. "Vorik does not apologize, ever. You must have impressed him." She bumped her shoulder against his. "I told you that you were worth it." The clan descended to the summer grounds in a long, winding procession that took 2 days. Quade walked beside Ezora, their packs light, their steps easy. The lowlands spread out before them, green and wide and full of promise. Somewhere down there was the cabin he had left behind, the trapline he had abandoned, the life he had walked away from. He did not miss it. When they reached the trade village at the forest's edge, the clan set up a temporary market, bartering furs and herbs and crafted goods with the human merchants who came from the surrounding farms. Quade helped translate, his human speech rusty but serviceable. The merchants stared at him, at the orc leathers he wore, at Ezora standing beside him with her hand on his arm. One of them, an old man with a white beard, finally asked the question everyone was thinking. "Are you a prisoner?" "No," Quade said. "I am bound kin." "What does that mean?" Quade looked at Ezora. She looked back, her eyes warm. "It means I am hers," he said, "by law and by choice." The old man blinked, then he shrugged. "Well, good for you, I suppose." They traded until sunset, then walked back to the clan camp together. The air was warm, the sky clear, the future open. Ezora took his hand as they walked, her grip strong and sure. "I have been thinking," she said. Again, quiet. "I have been thinking that when we settle for the summer we should build a cabin, something permanent, something ours." Quade stopped walking. "You want to build a home?" "I want to build our home." She faced him, her expression serious. "I know it is fast. I know we have only had a few months, but I am sure, Quade. I am sure about you, about us, about what I want. If you are not ready, I can wait. But I wanted you to know." Quade thought about the trial ground, the cold that had nearly killed him, the way Ezora had stayed by his side through all of it. He thought about the way she made him laugh, the way she challenged him, the way she looked at him like he was worth something. He thought about the future they could build together, strong and solid and real. "I am ready," he said. "Let us build a home." They built the cabin over the summer, working side by side in the long daylight hours. It was not large, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was solid and well made and theirs. They placed it at the edge of clan territory, close enough to be part of the community but far enough to have privacy. When it was finished, they stood in the doorway and looked at what they had made. "It is perfect," Ezora said. "It is small. It is ours." She took his hand. "That makes it perfect." They moved in that night, spreading furs on the floor and lighting a fire in the hearth. They lay together in the warmth, watching the firelight dance on the ceiling, and Quade felt something settle in his chest that he had not even realized was unsettled. "Ezora," he said quietly. "Yes, I love you." She turned to face him, her eyes bright in the firelight. "I love you too." They were married in the old way, under the open sky with the clan as witnesses. Varga performed the ceremony, binding their hands with a length of braided leather and speaking words in the old tongue that Quade mostly understood. When it was done, Ezora kissed him and the clan cheered, and for the first time in his life, Quade felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The seasons turned and the years passed, and the cabin became a home. Ezora continued to scout for the clan, ranging far into the lowlands and returning with news and trade goods. Quade managed the trap lines, teaching younger scouts his techniques and building a reputation as someone who could survive anything. They fought sometimes, sharp and fierce, but they always made up. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's needs, each other's fears. 3 years after the trial, Ezora told him she was pregnant. They were sitting outside the cabin watching the first snow of the season fall when she said it. Quade went very still. "You are sure?" "I am sure." "How long?" 2 months, maybe 3. She looked at him. "Are you happy?" Quade pulled her close, buried his face in her hair, and tried not to cry. "I am terrified." "Good, so am I." She laughed, shaky. "We will figure it out." Their daughter was born in the spring, small and green-skinned and perfect. They named her Bryn, and she had Ezora's eyes and Quade's stubborn chin. Ezora took to motherhood with the same fierce focus she brought to everything else, and Quade learned to change wrappings and soothe a crying infant and function on 2 hours of sleep. Bryn was 2 when their first son was born. They named him Beck, and he was louder than his sister and just as stubborn. The cabin, which had seemed so spacious, suddenly felt very small. They built an addition, then another. The trapline expanded. The clan grew used to the sight of Quade walking through camp with a child on his shoulders and another in his arms. On a cold winter evening, when Bryn was 5 and Beck was 3, and Ezora was pregnant again, Quade sat by the fire and watched his family. Ezora was teaching Bryn to braid leather, her hands patient and sure. Beck was asleep in Quade's lap, drooling on his shirt. Outside, the snow fell soft and steady, blanketing the world in white. "What are you thinking about?" Ezora asked without looking up. "How I ended up here." "You crossed a boundary chasing a fox." "I did," Quade smiled. "Best mistake I ever made." Ezora looked at him, her eyes warm. "The law says you are mine." "The law has nothing to do with it," Quade said. "I am yours because I choose to be, every day for the rest of my life." She set down the leather and crossed to him, kissed him soft and slow. Bryn made a disgusted noise. Beck slept through it. Outside, the snow kept falling, and inside, the fire burned warm, and Quade knew with absolute certainty that he was home. The years continued to unfold in a rhythm of seasons and small joys. Bryn grew tall and quick, learning to track and hunt under Ezora's watchful eye. Beck was loud and fearless, always climbing something he should not, always asking questions Quade did not know how to answer. Their third child, a boy they named Tomas, arrived on a spring morning when the world smelled like new grass and possibility. He was quieter than his siblings, thoughtful and careful, with Quade's gray eyes and Ezora's steady focus. The cabin expanded again. The trapline became profitable enough that Quade could hire help from the clan, young scouts, eager to learn. Ezora's reputation as a tracker grew, and she was invited to sit on the council as an advisor. They were building something larger than themselves, a legacy woven from choice and love, and the stubborn refusal to let the world tell them what was possible. When Bryn was 10, she asked about the trial ground. They were sitting outside after dinner, the family gathered around the fire, when she turned to Ezora and said, "Mother, is it true you and Father almost died to prove you loved each other?" Ezora choked on her tea. Quade coughed into his hand to hide a laugh. Beck looked up from the stick he was whittling, his eyes bright with interest. Tomas, who was 6 and still young enough to be easily impressed, gasped. "Who told you that?" Ezora asked. "Kelris's daughter. She said her father was one of the witnesses. She said Father was so cold his toes turned black and you had to warm them with your stomach." Bryn wrinkled her nose. "That sounds disgusting." "It was disgusting," Quade said. "Also necessary. But why did you have to go to the trial ground at all? Why did Vorik challenge you?" Ezora looked at Quade. He shrugged. They had known this conversation was coming eventually. "It is complicated," Ezora said. "Your father was human, I was orc. Some people thought we should not be together. The trial was a way to prove they were wrong." "That is stupid," Bryn said with the blunt certainty of a 10-year-old. "You are together. Obviously it worked." "Obviously," Quade agreed. "Did you really almost die?" Tomas asked, his voice small. "Yes," Ezora said honestly. "It was very cold and very dangerous and we were very lucky." "But you made it," Bryn said, "because you worked together." "Yes. So the people who said you should not be together were wrong." "Very wrong," Quade said. Bryn nodded, satisfied. "Good, I am glad they were wrong. Otherwise I would not exist, and that would be terrible." Beck snorted. "You think pretty highly of yourself." "I think accurately of myself." Bryn tossed her braid over her shoulder. "I am excellent." Ezora caught Quade's eye and they both smiled. Their children were growing up confident and loved, unburdened by the prejudices that had nearly destroyed their parents' chance at happiness. It was everything they had hoped for. The clan continued to thrive, and Quade's place in it became so unremarkable that children who had been born after his arrival did not remember a time when he was not there. He was simply Quade, the human who married Ezora, the trapper who taught half the scouts their trade, the father who could be seen walking through camp with a child on his shoulders and a patient smile. Vorik, who had never married, became war leader as he had always wanted. To everyone's surprise, he was good at it, leading the clan through 2 border disputes and a particularly harsh winter without losing a single warrior. He and Quade were not friends exactly, but they developed a mutual respect that bordered on warmth. Vorik's few visits to the cabin were awkward but genuine, and he always brought gifts for the children, which Bryn and Beck accepted with glee and Tomas accepted with solemn gratitude. On the 10th anniversary of the trial, Varga called Quade and Ezora to the council tent. She was older now, her hair fully gray, her movements slower, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. She gestured for them to sit, poured them both tea, and studied them in silence for a long moment. "You have built something remarkable," she said finally. "A family that bridges 2 peoples. A home that welcomes both orc and human. A future that your children will inherit without the weight of the prejudices that nearly crushed you." She paused. "I wanted to acknowledge that, to say that I am proud of you both." Ezora looked stunned. Quade found his voice first. "Thank you, chieftain. Thank you for proving that the old laws still have purpose, that they can be used to build instead of destroy." Varga smiled. "I am retiring at the spring thaw. Vorik will take my place as chieftain. But before I go, I wanted to make sure you knew that what you have done here matters. It will outlast me. It will outlast all of us." They left the tent in silence, walking back to the cabin hand in hand. When they were inside with the door closed and the fire burning and the children asleep in the loft, Ezora turned to Quade and said, "Do you ever think about that night? When I claimed you, all the time. Do you think we would have found each other without the law?" Quade thought about it. about the boundary he had crossed by accident, the dead scout, the warriors who would have killed him if Ezora had not intervened. About the claiming, the trial, the impossible odds they had beaten together. "I do not know," he said honestly, "but I am glad we did not have to find out." Ezora kissed him, slow and deep. "So am I." The years continued to pass, and the cabin on the edge of clan territory became a landmark. Human traders who came to barter with the clan would sometimes ask to see it, curious about the place where a human and an orc had built a life together. Ezora always refused, protective of their privacy, but Quade did not mind. Let people be curious. Let them wonder. Let them see that love was stronger than law, that choice mattered more than tradition, that two people from different worlds could build something beautiful if they were brave enough to try. Their children grew. Bryn became a scout like her mother, quick and clever and unafraid. Beck discovered a talent for metalwork and apprenticed with the clan's smith, his loud energy channeled into creation. Tomas, quiet and thoughtful, showed an aptitude for healing and began studying with the clan's medicine woman. They were all so different, so perfectly themselves, and Quade loved them with a fierceness that still surprised him. On the 20th anniversary of the trial, the clan held a feast in Quade and Ezora's honor. It was Vorik's idea, which surprised everyone, including Vorik. He stood before the gathered clan and spoke about the night Ezora had invoked the claiming law, about the trial that had nearly killed them both, about the family they had built and the example they had set. When he finished, the clan cheered, and Quade felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I did not think I would cry at my own party," he muttered to Ezora. "You always cry at parties." "That is not true. You cried at Bryn's name day. She was 3 and she fell off a fence. That was upsetting." Ezora laughed and pulled him close. They stood together at the center of the celebration, surrounded by their children and their clan and the life they had built, and Quade thought about how far they had come. From a clearing in the snow and a desperate invocation of old law to this, a family and a future and a love that had outlasted every doubt. "The law says I am yours," Quade said quietly, echoing the words Ezora had spoken so many years ago. "The law has nothing to do with it," Ezora replied, her voice warm. "You are mine because you choose to be." "Every day," Quade agreed, "for the rest of my life." They stayed at the feast until the fire burned low and the stars came out, and when they finally walked back to the cabin, it was hand in hand, the way they always had been, the way they always would be. The world had tried to keep them apart, had thrown law and prejudice and impossible trials in their path, but they had chosen each other anyway. And in the end, that choice had been enough. The cabin was warm when they entered, the fire still glowing in the hearth. They sat together in the quiet, watching the embers, and Quade felt the kind of contentment that only comes from a life well lived. He had crossed a boundary chasing a fox and found a future he never could have imagined. He had been claimed by law and chosen by love. He had built a home and raised a family and proven that the distance between two worlds was not as far as everyone thought. "I love you," Ezora said, her head on his shoulder. "I love you too," Quade replied. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines and the stars burned cold and bright. Inside, the fire crackled and the cabin held them close, and two people who had started as strangers sat together in the warmth they had built, bound by choice and strengthened by love, and knew without question that they were home.